Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey-Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of APA, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, June 19th, and we will hear the presentation, Driving Innovation to Create Aging-Friendly Communities. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar. For your content questions related to the presentation, again, just type those in the chat box in the webcast toolbar. If your question is for a particular panelist, I just ask that you state who you'd like to answer the question. And we will answer those questions at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. On your screen is a list of our sponsoring chapters and divisions for 2020. Thanks to all of those participating for making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today in particular, we are sponsored by APA's Private Practice Division, and you'll hear a little bit more about them in just a moment, but thanks to them for joining us today. Coming up next on your screen is a screenshot, actually, of our webcast webpage. Head over to ohioplanning.org. And that's where you can register for all of our upcoming sessions. If you look across the top here, you'll see on our web page, we have several tabs. If you go to prior webcast tab, that's where we have PDF copies of all of our previous presentations. Distance education tab, we have 2 sessions available for on-demand viewing through the end of this year. One is 1.5 ethics, one is 1.5 law. So be sure to check those out if you are in need of additional credits. So just head over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast for that. To log today's credits, which this session has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing, head over to planning.org and log into your MyAPA account. And from there, you can either search by today's title or the event number. And if you don't have time to write down the title or event number, just head over to our webcast webpage. All of that information is over there for you. And like us on Facebook, just search Planning Webcast. That's where we post any updates that we have to sessions. When we add new sessions to the list of available sessions to register for, that's where we'll post it. And be sure to click the red button and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We record all of our sessions and we post them to our channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube and we'll pop up along with our over 300 videos. And we have over 3,000 subscribers, so be sure to join us. Okay, I think that's it with all of my housekeeping items. I am now going to turn it over to Ramona Malahi, who will kick us off today. Ramona, the controls are now yours.
Thank you, Christine, and welcome everyone from the Private Planning Practice Division. I think no matter what stage in life we are, we do know that longer lives must be planned for, and that the aging baby boomer generation has brought sweeping changes for our communities, putting demands on healthcare, pensions, and Social Security. At the same time, it is promoting productive aging, benefiting and enriching communities from long-held expertise, encouraging volunteerism, and expanding community and healthier living options. According to the Census Bureau, by 2030, all baby boomers will be older than age 65, and this will expand the size of the older population so that 1 in every 5 residents will be retirement age. The population is expected to grow at a slower pace, age considerably, and become more racially and ethnically diverse. Older people are projected to outnumber children for the first time in U.S. history. As the population ages, the ratio of older adults to working age adults, also known as the old age dependency ratio, will shrink. What does that mean? Well, the number of workers sharing the cost of supporting Social Security beneficiaries will soon plummet to 2.2 in 2030 and by 2.1 in 2040. In 2019, the National League of Cities published their City Fiscal Conditions Report. It's a barometer of how communities across the country were experiencing varying economic realities. The key takeaway from the report was that the economy and the local fiscal conditions, as we all know, are not one size fits all. While some places were doing incredibly well, others were edging towards the next downturn. Some cities may be forced to choose between reforming or were being forced to choose between reforming healthcare or shrinking the public safety budget. Nearly 2 in 3 finance officers at that time from large cities had predicted a recession as soon as 2020 or 2021. In 2020, as communities respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and develop long-term recovery strategies, we know that local decision makers will be confronted with both constrained resources and extraordinary levels of need. And as the nation grapples with racial inequity and injustice, local leaders and stakeholders must consider how to create pathways of opportunity for the most vulnerable and how to prioritize and optimize resources. These are dynamic times. What strategic opportunities have the potential to improve the responsiveness and effectiveness of local government services and activities and help drive transformation? Well, today's panel will share some initiatives to upend inertia. They will share some ways to strategically maximize resources and help drive innovation to make progress towards creating more aging-friendly communities. Let me turn now to Mildred Warner. Mildred?
Hi. Can everyone see my screen?
You look good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ramona. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today and to share with you all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the surveys that we ran on planning across generations back in 2013 and also in 2019 and see if we can answer the question, are we making progress? This work is a collaborative project with my colleague, Dr. Xue Zhong, and also is supported by funding from the US Department of Agriculture. One of the important pieces here is that when we think about age-friendly, we need to shift the framework to an all-age friendly approach, where we pay attention to the needs of older adults, but also the needs of children, families, and singles. And what we use a logo that we developed for our project where we think about how we link planning and inclusive design with shared services and participation of all age groups to come to a common vision. And we also are very interested in looking at these issues across the rural to urban divide. So I'm going to, today in the talk, I'm going to compare the results we found in the 2013 Planning Across Generations survey, which we conducted with the International City County Managers Association. And I'm going to compare those with the 2019 Planning for All Ages survey that we just finished last fall, that was also done with the International City County Managers Association. It was sent to every city and county and most towns and villages in the United States. And we had almost 1,500 respond in 2013 and 1,300 respond in 2019. And the APA divisions helped with advertising this survey and also with the design of the questions. The first thing that we need to think about when we ask about change over time is to ask whether the surveys represent the same population. Unfortunately, only about 300 cities and counties answered both surveys. So what we have is two cross-sectional samples. And what we can see is they're remarkably similar by population size. The one difference we note is that we have slightly more communities responding from the metro core, and we have slightly fewer communities responding from rural areas. Now, the survey has many elements. We measure the built environment. What % of your community is covered by characteristics at the street, neighborhood, and housing level that coincide with what we determine to be age-friendly? Then we ask the same thing about your zoning codes. What percentage of your community is covered by zoning codes, again, at the street, neighborhood, and housing level that address age-friendly principles? Then we have a whole series of questions about planning. Do you pay attention to the needs of children, of older adults, of women in your comprehensive plan, your economic development plan, your transportation plan, and your emergency or disaster plan? Then we have a set of questions about engagement, families with children, youth, and seniors, barriers and motivators to planning for all generations, attitudes in your community. Then we have a whole battery of questions on services, formal services offered by government, as well as informal services offered by family, friends, and neighbors. And these services address transportation and mobility, health, education, economics, recreation, etc. Then we ask how you deliver those services. And we especially are interested in the role of cross-agency partnerships, not just for service delivery, but also for sharing information and building trust. And then we particularly ask about joint use with schools because we see them as an important partner in an age-friendly effort. And finally, we ask about the characteristics of your governing board. So what I'm going to do in the next 15 minutes is give you some overview of what we found. So in the first area, the built environment, again, we looked at the street level, the neighborhood level, and the housing level. And you can see under each bar chart, you can see what was measured. So street was sidewalk system connecting residents and services, bike lanes, complete streets. We see most communities say less than 25% of their community is covered, has these features. That's what low means. Then about 40% are in the medium range, and very, very few communities are in the high range, where more than 75% of their community has these street level features. With respect to neighborhood, we're looking at issues of neighborhood schools, parks or playgrounds within a half mile of every residence, public gathering spaces, a mix of retail services and housing, and fresh food markets. What we see here, and this is concerning, is that more communities responding in 2019 say that less than 25% of their community has these features. And fewer communities say that 25 to 75%. So we've seen a shift downward from those reporting at the medium level to those reporting at the low level, which says we're getting less age-friendly. Similarly, on housing, we see we're measuring affordable housing, family-size housing, rental, senior, intergenerational housing, subsidized housing, and affordable quality childcare. More communities report fewer communities report having an adequate supply. Now, what's driving this? It seems to primarily be a suburban and rural effect. You'll notice that this increase in communities at the low level, a decrease in the medium, is something we see in both the suburb and rural. We also see it in the picture here for the metro core, but it's not statistically significant. So in some sense, everybody's shifting down, and this is disturbing, but it's especially a concern for suburban and rural. Now, zoning. Zoning's how you could get there. If you want to make your streets better, mandate a sidewalk system, contain pedestrian-friendly guidelines in your design guidelines, require street connections between adjacent developments, require complete streets. But what do we see? We see more communities reporting that less of their community is covered by these zoning codes, and fewer reporting that a medium amount of their community is covered. On the neighborhood and housing level, we see no change. So at the neighborhood level, the zoning codes might be provide density bonuses, allow childcare centers, allow childcare businesses and residential units by right, promote parks or recreation facilities in all neighborhoods, allow mixed use. This is basically no change. Most communities are sitting in the medium level. And housing, you can promote affordable housing, allow family-sized, allow multifamily, mandate universal design. We see a slight increase in those communities that say this is true at a high level. With respect to planning, so in the respondents to this survey, 81% said that they had a comprehensive plan, and that's an improvement over 2013. That's why we have the green arrow. But only 50% of those who have a plan mention anything about addressing the needs of families with children, and only 53% mention the needs of addressing seniors, and only 12% mention anything particular about women. Only 39% have anything to do with schools and school siting. So we've got a long way to go of even writing the words about age-friendly into our comprehensive plan. Economic development plans are less common. Only half of the communities reported having them, and this was down from 2013. And only a third that have them address the needs of children or family or seniors. But we did see an increase in attention to childcare. 21% of those that had plans do address the needs of childcare. Emergency plans are the most common, partly because FEMA requires them and most communities have one, but fewer are reporting addressing the needs of families with children and seniors in those plans. And this is something that, as we have more crises coming at us, we really need to think about the unique and different needs that families with children and seniors face. We asked about transportation plans for the first time in the 2019 survey. 58% of the communities said they had one, and they were more likely, you'll notice that 69% of those said they addressed the needs of seniors. So this notion of mobility as a service seems to be catching on. With respect to services, you can see here we asked about a whole array of services, from home delivered meals for seniors, which is extremely important right now with the COVID pandemic, after school programs, summer camps, which more communities say they offer them, though now with COVID-19, that's not so sure. More youth employment programs. We basically don't see much change, but there are a couple of services that went down for seniors and a couple that went up for children. With respect to mobility services, we also see very little change. Street furniture is most common, found in about 60% of communities. Demand response transit, also common. Public restrooms in commercial districts and park, again, about 60%, reporting that at least that they have these services in at least 50% of their community. Walk to school programs, also common. Not a lot of change here on the mobility services list. Informal services. Recreation programs are the most common, and this is up from 2013. Neighborhood Watch was the next most common, and this is down from 2013. In general, what we're seeing is that social and recreational activities are up, and health and safety related activities seem to be down. And I don't know if this is due to our focus on placemaking, which is really the recreation and social aspect, maybe not giving quite as much attention to health and safety as we might need to, especially now that we're in these changed times with COVID-19. Cross-agency partnerships are absolutely critical to addressing the needs of all generations, and libraries are still at the top of the list as really leading organizations in our communities thinking about reaching out and working with other agencies to help meet the needs of children and older adults. School districts are the next, and that's increased from 2013, which is really good news because school districts tend to be relatively well funded. They have facilities, and they can be a key partner in promoting more age-friendly programs. Parks and recreation, also very important. Police departments are also ranked very high. What we notice is the cross-agency partnerships from groups particularly focused on older adults, like area agencies on aging or hospitals and healthcare providers. This has actually dropped since 2013, and I think that's a concern. When we did our focus groups, lots of the city managers talked about the role of the fire department, and that's also dropped in this last period. Planning has increased, and I'm pleased to see this because as a planner, I was disappointed to see that planning and transportation and housing were in the bottom half of this chart back in 2013, less likely to report cross-agency partnerships. And while they're still in the bottom half of the chart, which is not good, the planning departments are more of them report reaching out to build cross-agency partnerships, and I'm pleased to see that. Now, I talked about schools, and schools are really important as places to provide services. And while children report a strong level of, families with children report a strong level of trust in schools, seniors, not so much, but that's actually increased since 2013. And using schools to deliver information about child and age-friendly planning and services has also increased since 2013. But I titled this slide, More Talk, Less Action, because we see some significant drops in number of communities reporting that they offer adult education services through their schools, or that they offer nutrition programs and meals for seniors through schools. And so I think this is an area where we need to see more work done. One of the questions we added this year, which is at the top of the chart, is schools that offer child nutrition for evenings and weekends or summers. You know, the backpack programs. And I was pleased to see that almost just under 60% of communities reported that their schools do pay attention and provide services for child nutrition on evenings, weekends, and summer. And this is especially important now. The barriers. The barriers haven't changed much. Top one, lack of funding. Second problem, segregated funding streams. The third one was interesting. More communities are reporting lack of information. Now, is this because more places are beginning to plan and thinking about it and therefore recognize that they need to learn information? Or is this a call to us as planners to use the materials that APA has on its website or AARP has to help us reach out to our communities and give them the tools and the information they need to move? Liability is often brought up when you talk about trying to do multi-generational programming. And what we found when we run models on this is places that report more barriers actually provide more services. So it's not that barriers stop you from providing more services. It's just when you provide more services, you know about the barriers and you figure out how to get around them. And so don't let this chart be depressing, because the fact of the matter is that these don't hold communities back. They figure out a way to move forward. One of the things that is more distressing is that we're losing the middle. We asked about the composition of your local governing council, of your city or your county or your town or your village. And we asked whether it was dominated by longtime residents, evenly mixed, or dominated by newcomers. And it's no surprise that most of these boards are dominated by longtime residents. But that domination is even stronger today than it was back in 2013. We also asked about whether it was dominated by older residents, evenly mixed, or younger residents. And again, we see that older residents are increasingly dominating these governing boards. But that's not translating into growth in services for older adults. We saw those actually went down. It's not translating into more zoning to promote an age-friendly community, and it's not translating into a better built environment. So there's something going on here with the governing board. Maybe we need to do more education and information to older adults themselves to open, especially leaders, up to the possibilities of what we need to promote a more age-friendly community. We also ask a number of attitudinal questions, our hope being that by bringing seniors together, participation in our communities, that would lead to a more common vision of planning for all ages. Or by bringing participation of families with children, that would lead to a common vision regarding planning for all ages. And while we were close to 44 and 50% of communities saying, oh yes, that's true, back in 2013, in the 2019 survey, only a third said that was true. We're losing our sense of common vision. This is a serious concern. We had also asked back in 2013, is your community, my community is not divided by race, class, or old-time or newcomer divisions. Half said yes, now only a third. And we also said, you know, ethnic and cultural diversity has led to new approaches to planning or new approaches to programming for all ages. Again, it's down. So we have increased division in this society. That should be no surprise. We hear about it in the news all the time, but it's also showing up on this survey, and it's very concerning and can undermine our ability to create more age-friendly communities. But on the positive side, we ask a whole bunch of questions about positive attitudes towards seniors and children as a resource for the community, that when communities provide services, everybody benefits, that these are valuable consumer populations, that we have a responsibility to care. And you can see that for the strongly agree and agree, the numbers are pretty similar, but the strongly agree has slightly increased. So where there is positive attitude, it's a more positive attitude than it used to be. Engagement hasn't changed much either, except for seniors. We see more of them are very engaged, the hatch line on the second bar, than they were in 2013. So this also gives some positive possibility. So what leads to change? We've done a lot of papers, a lot of regression models, you know, which factors are really significant. And the significant factors are engagement of seniors and families with children. Engage the people who most benefit from the change, and they will help you make that change. Then we need community leadership. We've even done a paper we found that communities with female managers move a little quicker. You need to address the issues of children and seniors in your comprehensive plans and in your zoning codes. And we need to build collaboration across agencies. And if you do those things, you'll get a better built environment, you'll have broader housing choices, you'll have better services for children. Just quickly, the AARP released livability indicators back in 2014, updated them again in 2018, and they address issues of engagement, environment, opportunity, housing, neighborhood built environment characteristics, transportation, and health. And we were curious, and these are based on World Health Organization's domains of age-friendly, and we were curious what leads to better community health. And I want to just give you a little picture here. You'll notice that neighborhood, the blue, is the most important thing, especially for urban core and suburbs, in helping to create better community health. But if you look at the rural core and the remote rural, these are the micropolitan core and micropolitan outlying places, you'll see that engagement and opportunity matter more. So we really do need to pay attention to how we promote engagement and opportunity, especially in communities that don't have the physical built environment that we consider to be age-friendly. So I ask, why is the age-friendly movement stalled, which this surveys seem to suggest? And we've had more progress in streets and mobility, less in neighborhood and housing. Planning boards are telling us they need more information and training on how to incorporate age-friendly. We've recognized that there's an urban bias in the age-friendly designs that leave suburbs and rural areas behind. We also have a role here that developers can play. We've recognized the need for planning to reach out and build more cross-agency partnerships. And we've realized the critical importance of engagement. What are we going to do about the problems of rising division in our communities? And how are we going to build a common vision across difference? In short, an all ages approach. These articles, I've mentioned that we've done quite a few. You can find them on my website, or you can email me at mwarner@cornell.edu, and this information will be up on the back slide as well. Be happy to share any of it with you. And with that, I want to turn it over to Laura.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this opportunity today to talk about our project with the City of San Antonio's Department of Human Services. And what I'm going to show you is their effort to take their work in building an age-friendly community, being part of AARP's Age-Friendly Cities, and attempting to grow capacity across the city's departments to be able to help in the adoption of policies that align with the principles of the age-friendly cities, as well as implement. And as part of this effort, we focused on senior centers for them in an attempt to optimize existing local government investments and their current resources. And to do that through a visualization tool, which we utilized as the ESRI Storyboard. So first, I'm just going to spend just a couple of minutes kind of orienting you to the city of San Antonio. 17% of their population is over the age, 17% of their population is over the age of 60, and that represents roughly 243,000 individuals. And I want you to remember that number because there is a wide range of opportunity for growth of senior center participation and membership. And this is how we intended the tool to be used to help them in the planning process and to be able to coordinate across public services and departments. 95% of their population over 60 lives within 5 miles, and then 10% are only participating in the senior center programming. And I, guess I will also make the disclaimer that there are certainly, all this research was done pre-COVID, and we helped them prepare the information. They took it to their city council. They have, in early January and February, were able to make significant strides in getting support from the city council in a variety of ways. And so now, during this COVID pandemic, I'm sure that there are other efforts underway on how to move forward, and we'll continue to work with them to understand that. But what is exciting is that the city of San Antonio has been a longtime member of the Age-Friendly Cities Network. They adopted their first resolution in 2010 and have continued to maintain ongoing support among their mayor and local government. They, over the last couple of years, they have completed some significant planning initiatives which have incorporated their age-friendly cities planning efforts into housing, transportation, into their comprehensive plan as well. So the purpose of our work was to help them grow this capacity to kind of push it out of the human services and senior services department at the city to coordinate and collaborate additional policy adoption and implementation, and to utilize technology and mapping to help not only the city departments and their leadership and the city council visualize their role and in decision making, but also as a mechanism to build community engagement. And so I'll show you that in the ESRI Storyboard. And so the first part of this effort, I'm only going to focus on two, was a survey to understand the evolving demand for senior services through their senior center programming. And that, again, is important to them because this is a big investment in 10 comprehensive centers and over a number of 50 partner sites and 8 part-time centers that they maintain. And so to really understand what are the interests and needs of their population of current users and how they can understand how to grow participation. So clearly there's a lot of opportunity with only 10% of the 243,000 currently using the services, and to understand what that means. And then I will talk about the ESRI Storyboard that we utilized to help map opportunities for location decisions for future senior centers, but we also integrated the survey findings to build a probability of utilization of services to help them understand market potential around this current senior center system, and I will show you that. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some of the survey findings to orient you to the interests of the older adults and using the centers now. So over 67% are women, 49% are within the age group of 65 to 74. More than half of their population identify as Hispanic. The income level is identified as mostly over 61% under 25,000. There we go. And then these next couple of slides help to show you the variation of the influences of use among age, race, and ethnicity, educational attainment, and income level, which provides an opportunity for them to understand how to continue to develop culturally competent programming and to market and increase membership of the older adults currently residing in the city. So you can see here that there are distinct differences between age demographic or age category cohort from 60 to 64 to over 85 plus, that this is very consistent and reaffirms what we already know in the literature. There were distinct differences between men versus women in their interest area, and this definitely presented an opportunity for thinking about growth. 33% of the population of users identified as male, which isn't surprising given lifetime, what we know about lifespans between women and men, but also recognizing that only 10% of the population is currently using the senior center. It does provide some insight on opportunities to grow programming topics in certain areas, and the service utilization maps help us identify that. And again, we saw a lot of distinct difference between race and ethnicity and interest in and use of programs and services. So I will come back to demonstrate how this information was then incorporated into our utilization maps. And then just to wrap up, we found the same thing related to variation of interest across program and services related to income level. And so now I'm going to just toggle back over to Google to show you the ESRI storyboard that we utilized and walk you through some of the great key features of this tool. And in thinking about this tool, this is a tool that is likely already available in some format in your planning department, and then bringing in your senior services to coordinate and collaborate on future planning is a great opportunity to connect senior services and aging with your planning efforts within your community. And so the ESRI storyboard is just a different platform that the link can be shared. It can be posted on your website. You may already be familiar with ESRI storyboard. A great component of it is that it allows you to integrate public comment. Now, we did not have a public comment component as part of this project, but if there were, interesting things that were important to the community and shared by them, for this particular center that's up here where my arrow is, that's green, that can be incorporated easily in there. If there are photographs and commentary from the public that you want to incorporate, that can all be captured here on your storyboard. And so we build the story with just some basic information. This is identifies the location of current centers and walks you through. We added some commentary to help orient a user of the site to know what they're looking at. I'm going to just keep moving through for the sake of time to orient you to the maps. This shows us the population. So, simple data that's readily available in your planning department through the census that can be displayed visually and then utilized as part of, for us, the attractiveness index that we built to help inform the location of future senior centers. So again, the dots and the stars identify both the senior center locations and the partner sites, which all participate in the offering of senior services. And that this shows the population of older adults in 2024. And then we have a percent change. So you can actually see here that the older adult population actually begins to get pushed out of the the core of San Antonio, which offers an opportunity for conversation about, other really important issues associated with age-friendly, particularly probably housing value and access to affordable units. And you could overlay this easily with the senior centers so that you can identify then the relationship between where older people in your community live and their access. Right now, 95% are within a 5-mile radius of an existing center, which means which then they also have transportation that they offer within 5 miles. And so this map here is the map that we created for their future center locations. And this, again, is where we kind of integrate their participation in the age-friendly cities movement and the network as part of this decision-making process. And so the attractiveness index is what we called it, is the algorithm that we built, but it is all supported primarily by data that we were able to get from the planning department, and then other supplemental data that we were able to get from ESRI. So again, if you have ESRI as your mapping tool, you probably will have access to this data as well. And so what we were interested in was really trying to kind of bring the theory of the AARP's livability index to life in San Antonio through the variation of the geography and the variables that we identified. So we supported our building of this attractiveness index through the literature, so evidence in the GIS literature about the variation in geographic variables that relate to age-friendly outcomes and environmental conditions, which we utilized a feature, a variable related to toxic sites, location to toxic sites as part of this. I'll show you it in a moment. We went back to San Antonio's Age-Friendly Cities Planning Survey that they originally administered as part of their effort and participation in the Age-Friendly Cities planning process. We utilized the WHO age-friendly domains as a way to categorize our variables and then weight them. And then we also, as I mentioned, use the AARP livability index as a theoretical platform to inform the variables that were selected. And so these variables had to include, and we include a table here, so it's very transparent for the public what was used to build the attractiveness index. And so these have a common theme. They relate to these 4 categories, which were highlighted as the most important as the categories in the San Antonio Age-Friendly Cities Planning Survey. And so that's what helped us categorize this and build this specifically for San Antonio, because this is what was prioritized to them. And then also the variables that were used, such as those representing points or counts, such as doctors' offices and others that are related to health and wellness. They were converted to density measures. We utilized the change in home values and converted that to the difference within the block group, and then we weighted it based on those 4 categories. And so what you're seeing here in the yellow and the orange are the locations at a 3-mile radius and a 5-mile radius from new and existing facilities, and so the darker areas are, as you get darker, the more attractive that location is. And so those locations would have relationship to fewer toxic sites, more transportation opportunities, variation across age group, better housing values for older people. And that is what's driving the location of these specific facilities. And so, but what we do, highlight for the policymakers and planners is that there are other obviously important aspects to consider, such as the availability of land, zoning laws, other variables that are important to the community themselves. And that's where this becomes an important engagement tool. And so now I just want to wrap up for a few moments to show you, as you scroll through, how what I was talking about earlier, how we utilize the survey to then examine service utilization, which also relates to thinking about where we want to locate future senior centers. And so these are all based on our logistic regressions, the probability models for utilizing each individual service related to the population within these census block groups over the age of 60. And so when you see a green dot, that means the service is already being delivered at that facility. So the dots also align with the location of the current facilities. And where you see a larger green over a darker blue, so the darker blue is the density of 60 plus that are interested in that type of service, you are being informed that there is a high probability of utilization and market potential to deliver that service. So, I mean, most of them are all delivering meals for very important reasons. Where this becomes even more valuable, I mean, some of it is in the value of that. Could you co-locate services? Could you collaborate with others that may be providing meals that aren't on this list, a church, for instance? So it may give you a way to think about optimizing the delivery of your service based on the demand and need and the market opportunity. But here's another one. So arts, and this gives us the red, identifies where the service is not being offered, but where the public has indicated a demand for that service. So you can see here that in some locations that market potential is being met. So you've made some good planning decisions about the services being provided. But in other locations, there's opportunity to expand arts there, or maybe co-locate services at existing centers. I mean, I'm going to wrap up with this one, which kind of relates to what Mildred was talking to us about with regards to libraries and the relationship with public libraries. So this still is representing senior services, but you can see a big gap in the probability for utilization, but not responding to the market opportunities. So the larger red circles are showing us where there tends to be high demand for library services, but they're not offering it at that senior center location. And so, you know, it could be a decision to incorporate it in the senior center, but it also could be a decision to co-locate or collaborate with the public library on the provision of services. You know, thinking about that concept of getting beyond the walls of the senior center and maybe building membership because of these partners that you've created with other providers. And again, that also kind of gets the delivery of senior services and activities and opportunities for our older residents into other departments within your community. And so I just want to wrap up, though, in kind of just summarizing how planners can think about using both of these tools. And again, they both could be, you know, built with the assistance between multiple departments because the data sets, like I said, came from the city. But to think about, again, the land that's available, the geographic variation that exists within the variables that you may be using to apply your theoretical or understanding of age-friendly and what you've adopted in your age-friendly cities plan. But final decision should, you know, combine the attractiveness of a location, the probability of service acceptance, the number of the population living in that area, the services that will be provided, you know, and the feasibility of that senior center building or the opportunity for collaboration with other partners within the community. So thank you very much. And I will look forward to questions and then change this over to Jana.
Hi there, and happy Juneteenth Day. So I'm Jana Lynett with AARP's Public Policy Institute, and thank you, Mildred and Laura, for sharing all of these good examples of ways that we can make our communities more age-friendly and giving a shout out to the Livability Index. I think a lot of what you all shared could definitely inform some of our programming. So really appreciate all that great information. Now, ironically, even though I work on the team that put the Livability Index together and work on age-friendly communities, I'm not going to specifically talk about those two programs or initiatives. What I'm going to talk about are paratransit innovations. And when the four of us sat down and put this proposal together many months ago, our world was very much different. And since that time, COVID has dramatically changed our travel patterns. It's also laid bare deep-rooted inequities in our society. And it's really required that the transportation services sector respond literally overnight to a new set of demands. And it also underscores the need for us to continue pushing innovation forward to solve the challenges of today. So I'm going to talk again about emerging innovations in paratransit. What do I mean by that term? Well, I'm not only talking about complementary ADA paratransit, but paratransit more broadly to include other forms of demand responsive services such as human services transportation, rural public transportation, microtransit, and other door-to-door services. Our current situation puts pressure on all of us to quickly improve these services so that they can offer safe travel alternatives for all community members to get folks to healthcare, jobs, and services. And anything that we do now to improve these services for our current situation also will benefit older adults, people with disabilities, rural residents, and really all of us down the road. So how is paratransit responding to COVID-19? Well, many providers quickly responded by shifting from primarily moving people to moving goods to people so that individuals could physically distance in their homes. So for instance, Charlevoix County Transit in northern Michigan began home delivery of groceries, food pantry packages, meals provided by senior centers, and prescription medications to older adults and at-risk individuals so that they would not have to leave their homes and potentially expose themselves to the virus. The transit agency also provides transportation to residents who need to get to a school food program or one of the local restaurants offering reduced or free meals to students. And on top of those extras, CCT has extended free fares to all riders and waived eligibility requirements for medical transportation. And luckily, the Federal Transit Administration allows this flexibility to use existing pots of money in order to provide this type of delivery service. The CARES Act also does that as well. Now, Rabbit Transit in rural Pennsylvania has responded to the pandemic by partnering with the local health system to provide homeless individuals and families transportation to testing facilities and safe quarantine locations. And this is not without sizable risk to its bus drivers. In fact, across the country, we've already seen the loss of 100 plus transit employees nationwide who've lost their lives to COVID-19. So really we need to honor our bus drivers as the front line heroes they are. And we also in our communities need to make sure that they have the protective equipment that they need in order to stay safe, and that we strongly encourage riders to use face masks and practice social distancing. Another example of how paratransit has responded to COVID-19 is StarTran in Lincoln, Nebraska. It introduced microtransit service in April, something that they were planning to introduce later in the summer, but moved that forward in order to meet some of the new demands posed by COVID-19. And what microtransit does is it allows customers to book a shared trip on a smaller vehicle on demand through an app, very much like one might book an Uber or Lyft. Now in Lincoln, Nebraska, microtransit commingles ADA paratransit service, meaning that an ADA paratransit customer can now benefit from same-day service as other microtransit customers, but that individual would not have to pay the $5 fare. Now, currently, the vans only carry up to 2 people at a time in order to maintain safe social distancing. But of course, as we move beyond this pandemic, that could increase, and we could see microtransit being able to fill all of the available seats on the vehicles. Now, transportation through bookings has some potential advantages during a pandemic. These advanced reservations, again, allow transit providers to ensure safe social distancing, and customers get a guaranteed seat at a given time. They don't have to worry that they may have to board a crowded bus at their bus stop, or that their bus won't stop at the stop because of concerns about crowding. And should society accept it, and that's a big if, I think, the same technology could be used for contact tracing, as is already being done in other countries such as China, Singapore, and Australia. Now, innovations such as microtransit hint at broader changes within the transportation sector, where a number of actors as varied as public transportation agencies and automobile companies such as Toyota are making investments. And collectively, the term mobility as a service is gaining some ground. And what that really refers to is bringing all the different ways that we can get around in our communities into a single network, a system, a platform that provides great convenience, kind of one-stop shopping for the customer, providing that easy discovery of how, what transportation's available at a given point in time, easy booking, easy mode transfers, easy payment. Now, I published a paper entitled Universal Mobility as a Service to emphasize the need that as we're designing these new mobility ecosystems, we need to be thinking about people with special needs and creating and satisfying their needs within the same system, as opposed to what we have today, where individuals who may be elderly with certain mobility limitations or people with disabilities really have to rely on very inferior transportation system compared to what those of us without mobility limitations have access to. So it really emphasizes the universal design throughout that entire system. So with that, AARP has produced this short motion graphic video that I want to share just to give people a better sense of what our vision is for universal mobility as a service. I think Christine is loading that up.
Yes, loading up right now.
Thanks.
Emerging technologies have put the U.S. on the cusp of a major disruption in transportation. Though America prides itself on its highway system, what happens when traffic overwhelms our road networks, or when one doesn't have the means to own a car or the ability to drive? For 1/3 of the nation's population, those who do not drive, getting around their communities can be a daily challenge. Yet, there is a new transportation concept taking hold: universal mobility as a service. This technology platform can ensure that everyone gets from here to there easily, safely, and affordably. Take Tom, for instance. Like many of us, he faces a traffic nightmare with every commute, time that could otherwise be spent with family, friends, or exercising. Anne, who gave up driving years ago, doesn't like to impose on her daughter for rides, and she misses her friends. Tom and Anne live in different communities and face different challenges, but both would benefit from a transportation system that offered more options and a better future. To avoid traffic nightmares, Tom uses the Universal Mobility app to ease his commute, factoring traveling time, cost, and weather. The app selects the best route based on real-time data, allowing Tom to avoid traffic and construction. Today, Tom chooses to get home by express bus and bike. His self-driving bus smoothly operates in its own lane. Through the mobility app, he orders groceries and a bike, ready for pickup at the express bus station. Bike share stations are located on most city blocks, so Tom easily bikes to his apartment building. But what about 82-year-old Anne, who no longer drives and lives in a small town with her daughter Maria? Universal Mobility as a Service can also make it easier for people like Anne to get from point A to point B while relieving her daughter's concern for her mom's transportation. Because Maria works and Anne has regular doctor's appointments, they often rely on the Universal Mobility platform to get Anne from home to the doctor and back. Maria can use the platform to identify transportation options for her mom and evaluate details like costs and timing. She can select vehicle and service options for her mother's trip. Because Anne uses a walker, Maria selects the option that lets Anne store her walker, and she requests special assistance into and out of the car by a trained driver. Maria is also able to track her mom's trip on her phone, knowing that she arrives safely and on time for her appointment. When Anne's visit is over, the office uses the Universal Mobility portal to call for Anne's ride home and to make a follow-up appointment with a new pickup and drop-off schedule. Universal Mobility as a Service. No matter age, income, disability, or community size, everyone can get from here to there, easily, safely, and within budget. For more information, go to aarp.org/future of transportation.
So how do we get from where we are today to this kind of idealized future with universal mobility as a service? So we have to start by modernizing human services transportation. And we can do that by creating a standardized way to share trip data. Now, one of the things that motion graphic probably introduces a little bit of a misconception is that while at the end result for the customer may look like an app, all of the stuff that's happening behind the scenes is more than just downloading a particular app from a different company. It's about creating a system where all the different providers come into the system together. And the only way that they're going to be able to do that is if they have a common way of sharing trip data in a common format. So today, the demand responsive or paratransit trip cycle it's often not automated. You have a lot of small senior center agencies providing transportation or volunteer driver programs that may still be using pencil and pen and picking up the phone to schedule rides. Or you also could have more sophisticated transit agencies that are providing ADA paratransit through ride scheduling systems. But when those systems want to talk to the next provider in the same region in order to share vehicle capacity, customers across a system, there's not that interoperability to do so, because at this point in time in the United States, we're missing this universal way of sharing trip data called data specifications or data standards. And all of that creates a huge barrier to coordination. By having these types of standards in place, it would really allow someone who wants to book a trip and has to travel on two different providers. Right now in the human services world, if I needed to make that trip, I may have to make a reservation 48 hours in advance through one reservation line for the first leg, and then turn around to another reservation line and make the second leg of the trip also 24 to 48 hours in advance. I can only hope that the vehicles come together in space and time at a reasonable coordination. But in the future, that could be handled through an automated process by the systems exchanging that information. Now, it also allows the development of mobility as a service systems to develop more affordably, because if Chicago, if San Francisco, New York, DC, Kentucky, if they're all developing their own systems, they're paying all of that development cost. Whereas if we agree to a nationwide standard for how we're going to share this data, then that lowers the development costs for everyone. And in fact, a lot of this foundational development work has already been done by the Transit Cooperative Research Program, which released data specification in November. So that specification, it really allows all of this trip data to be shared from, for each step of this trip cycle, from the reservation to scheduling the trip with a particular vehicle and driver to performing the trip and the financial transactions behind the scene. It requires no email, no picking up the phone, faxing information back and forth. Now, the transactional data specification that TCRP released, it alone doesn't get us to universal mobility as a service, but it's really a crucial component. And viewed within this open and universal mobility platform architecture, it constitutes the red plugs that allow us the integration of all the DRT providers in the communities. So from human services and medical transportation providers to volunteer transportation providers, senior shuttles, ADA paratransit, new mobility providers such as e-scooters and bike share, taxis, transportation network companies, etc. Now, Flex Denmark is hands down the world's most sophisticated, extensive and well-coordinated demand responsive transportation system in the world. Flex Denmark, it's a publicly owned IT company. It's owned by the 5 regional transportation authorities that are located in the country. And back in the 70s, to deal with this problem, under Danish law, communities have to provide transportation to get their residents to regional hospitals if they need transportation. And for people with qualifying disabilities, those individuals get much reduced transportation as well. And what many social service agencies were doing back in the 70s is that they were booking these individuals' trips all on taxis. And that was very cost prohibitive. It was very inefficient. It was creating traffic jams around hospitals. And so they said, we can do something better. And simultaneously, there was a number of software developers that were working on a data standard or specification that's evolved into what's called the SUDI standard, which is used throughout Scandinavia. And Denmark has applied this into a nationwide system where they now have integrated more than 550 different private sector transportation providers to provide all of the different demand responsive transportation services to residents in the country. Not only people trying to get to medical appointments, not only people with disabilities, but they've opened up this system for on-demand transportation to pretty much the general public in most communities. More than half of local jurisdictions are buying into this system in order to open it up to the general public. And what that means for the customer is that they can have on-demand transportation. The system, or Flex Denmark, asks that people make a reservation 24 to 48 hours in advance. But the system is able to accommodate on-demand travels just like Uber or Lyft. They see a 95% on-time performance defined as a vehicle arriving within 15 minutes of its scheduled arrival time and never before. I mean, in the United States, we would consider a good on-time performance window of 30 minutes before to 30 minutes after a scheduled pickup time. They make almost 6 million annual trips, about 15,000 trips per day on average, with 24,000 trips on their peak day, which happens to be a Danish holiday. Now, the portal that they use, it can be integrated with various scheduling systems used in hospitals, medical offices, human service agencies, in order to connect their clients directly to transportation. And I mentioned it's owned by the 5 public transportation authorities. So there's a very high level of institutional coordination. It's one nationwide system, over 550 providers. And within the actual programming of the system, it has built in a cost allocation model. into the software so that all of the different payers in that system can feel confident that they're not overpaying for their clientele's trips. And all of this has been made possible through an automated interface and common data standard. So I had the privilege of going to Denmark a couple of years ago with a film crew to study the Flex Denmark system, and we've produced a couple of videos about that. I don't have time to share those today, but I do invite you to go to our website, again, aarp.org/future transportation, to see those videos and read the article. So with that, I think we have time to open it up to questions for the group.
All right, yes, we do have questions. Folks, if you have more questions, just go ahead and type them into the chat box in your webcast toolbar. And just as a reminder, we are recording this session. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube. And we'll also have a PDF of the session available at the conclusion of today's session. Okay, let's get started here. I can get my screens up. Okay, the first question, and I can't see anyone's webcams right now. I'm not sure why. I just want to make sure. Oh yeah, there you all are. Hi guys. Okay. Okay. Let's start with you, Mildred. How confident are you that the survey responses are comparable between 2013 and 2019? Were people more likely to respond positively in 2013? Changes in personnel completing the survey? Were the same communities responding? Can you kind of talk a little bit about the differences between those two and between 2013 and 2019?
Right. What we know so far is that both surveys are representative by population size and metro status, though we do see slightly more metro core communities and slightly fewer rural. As I said, only about 300 cities and counties responded to both surveys. And so you're basically taking two cross-sectional snapshots in time and comparing them. It is certainly possible. Back in 2013, when we did the focus groups back in 2011 to develop this survey, a lot of people didn't know what we were talking about. And by 2019, people knew what we were talking about. So we actually changed the order. We had to start with the attitude questions in 2013 to get people thinking about what we meant by age friendly. In 2019, we looked at it and we said, why are we starting with attitude questions? Let's start with comprehensive planning. Are you planning for aging? And so we switched it up and we moved the attitudes to the back end of the survey. So definitely there's a sense that we have moved forward. But what I was surprised at is that the survey shows basically no change or more communities reporting themselves at the low end. We do see a little bit more with planning and a little bit more with senior participation, but maybe the best conclusion is the survey's not showing forward movement. It's like we're stalled, and it may be, and I don't know, Jana may have ideas or Laura may have ideas, but you know, there's only so many communities that have signed on to be age friendly. What is it, 400 or something? We have a long way to go to reach everybody else. And I think the word is starting to get out there. The thing that I thought was interesting was that more communities were saying they needed more information, which suggests that they're aware that there's an issue they need to address, but they're still not there with addressing it.
Okay, anyone else have comments on that?
Well,
and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I could just add also too, though, that we, you know, I haven't noticed, you know, an uptick in the publication of research on the topic in core journals that would be informing, you know, local government decision making. So some are there, but I still see it primarily the literature being published in gerontology journals, like you know, Journal for Applied Gerontology, and so that makes it difficult in the theory to practice, where we're trying to get the research into the practitioner journals to help inform. So that's one area that concerns me, that we're see it heavily still in gerontology, but not necessarily as heavy in some of the other journals that might be informing local government policy and decision making. So there continues to be a lot of room, but we have to also continue to educate our colleagues on the importance of the topic as well. And doing things like this, where it kind of pushes it into the thinking and understanding of planning, of city management, to create that relevance for them, to kind of get it out of, not get it out, but move it beyond just the human services or senior services divisions of local governance into more departments, might be one way to be thinking about it. And the opportunity for scholars and practitioners to continue to be informing on the need for this research.
Yeah, and I was actually wondering if, given the amount of effort of the Age-Friendly Communities program, both under AARP as well as other organizations as well who are working in this area, if there may be more of a understanding of what the need is, to where there's a greater recognition that, oh, we thought we were doing something, but now we realize that we have a whole heck of a lot more to go. And so they're kind of reassessing the bar. But again, I don't know that you would have that kind of clarity from the survey itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jana, all of a sudden, everyone's contact info is no longer up on the screen.
Oh, you know what? That is because I minimized and I went to the Age-Friendly site to look something up. I will totally put it back.
Thank you. Just so folks have that. Let's talk about San Antonio for a few minutes here. The first question on that topic: with older people, particularly over the age of 60, being more at risk for COVID-19, what kind of new policy initiatives do you foresee senior centers having, such as in San Antonio?
That's a wonderful question, and something that we need to continue to explore. I'm not trying to pass on that. I am learning myself. I don't have a specific answer to that at the moment. I am interested in reaching out to San Antonio to find out and learn from them on what some of their future decision making may be, given, right, that this is the most vulnerable to COVID. We have now witnessed tens of thousands of older people die from COVID in nursing homes. I frequently visit a retirement community here in my neighborhood and have some friends there, and they're starting to relax. It isn't a nursing home, but it is a private retirement community. They're beginning to relax and thinking about how to provide dining in their dining hall again, but by doing the same things as restaurants with spacing. We're continuing to learn more and more about the spread of the disease. So as that information becomes, published, and we understand, is it from touching, or is it really from, prolonged exposure to someone, that we'll start to, I'm confident that we'll start to see some protocols that will help allow people to come together again. It may still be quite some time until that. We're still in such an early phase. I mean, we don't have a vaccine, we don't have a medical, we don't have a response to it once you get it. So it's, I'm sure it's very early for a lot of our senior services to know how to re-engage in that. And maybe Jana, you might have some perspective on that from AARP or Mildred as well.
Well, not on that specifically. I do know I have colleagues that are working very extensively in trying to make sure that nursing homes are providing families with the information that they need to know that their loved ones are being kept safe, that there's an opportunity for them to engage with them through, virtual settings, even if they can't visit them directly. And just making sure that there's, clear reporting of cases and all of that. So there's a lot of work being done in this area, but I don't know specific to the question that was asked.
Yeah, I know, for instance, YMCAs are beginning to open, and they're not saying certain age groups can't participate, but they're using CDC guidelines to try to provide programming in a way that ensures social distancing. The other recommendation I would have for individuals to be really at the top of knowing what some of the research says is a lot of the journals are doing kind of a quick mini research call for projects on COVID-19, so we can begin to inform. So Public Administration Review, the Journal of Applied Gerontology, I know are some that would have some relevance to local governance and thinking about the delivery of senior services. There are many others, gerontologists that are publishing articles as they become accepted and peer-reviewed and accepted about COVID-19. So you may be able to get some of the latest findings for some of these specific areas.
Okay. Okay, let's stick with San Antonio for one more question here. The pie charts that show the percentages of usage, is there any information of that, what the ethnicities are of those percentages as well?
I have them, we have that broken down using a standard survey protocol for, it was Hispanic, African American, white, and Asian. And so that had the percentages breakdown. I can, if you want to go back to the screen, but I know that I gave you the slides, so you can go back and look. It was over 52% Hispanic, which is, pretty consistent with and representative of the population of San Antonio. And then I believe it followed by white, African American, and Asian had the lowest participation. I think it was about 8%. And so that was on the pie chart and identified based on those 4 categories. And those were the ones that we used for the survey.
Okay, thank you. Mildred.
Go ahead. No, if I could just comment, I found those results just to be fascinating and really underscore how important it is to really go into a deep dive of any survey research and understanding what people need and want for programming, because there were such marked differences by, age, by income, by gender, by, race and ethnicity, that I really found those informative.
Excellent. And hopefully, in working with them too, is to think about, the future of programming and building culturally competent programming, to think about staffing, professional development. So our work went pretty deep into those other areas to help them with a strategic planning initiative.
Thank you. Mildred, you noted that local governments indicated the need for more age-friendly training. So what age-friendly topics would be best to cover in a municipal training? Where do they start?
Well, I think that's going to depend on where your government is at. And I think the points that we've made on this call, that this really extends beyond your Office for the Aging. That's the silo where we've put services for older adults. And what we're asking for here is a shift to really having planning take the lead. And we've seen more progress in transportation and mobility services than we've seen in land use planning, for example. So that would seem to be an area where we need a lot more work. But you can't change your zoning rules and your land use planning rules unless your community and your developer community is supportive of that change. So it seems that transportation is where we've made the most progress. Services sitting back in silos is something we understand. Moving those services out of silos and moving to land use and housing, and really thinking about what that means for changing up our zoning. I think that's the challenge that we face. And to get there, we also probably need training in how to engage different groups, because even though we see that older adults are more represented on boards, we don't see that translating into more services or more community change.
Okay, thank you.
So could I just comment on one of Mildred's survey results? And I found it really interesting where the communities kind of rated themselves in the middle category on things like housing, and there was something else, maybe that was the primary one, but I would say, based on the data that we see, no community really should be rating itself in the middle on housing, given that less than 4% of all housing stock in the United States is really accessible, and given that our extreme housing affordability crisis that really runs across communities all across the United States in different sizes of communities. So that to me struck me as very interesting. I wonder if you had any additional comment on that.
We actually didn't ask, we didn't have a middle category for housing. We just said, do you have an adequate supply, yes or no? And so one of the things is, this is perception, right? So in the area of childcare, for example, they may say my community has an adequate supply. Anyone with kids knows no community in America has an adequate supply. So in some sense, the survey responses are a reflection of the attitudes of our city leaders. And if they don't understand that we have a problem with affordable housing, and most of them did not say they had an adequate supply of affordable housing.
Okay.
But that part of this is also what the survey is also showing is what our leaders think. And if our leaders are not sufficiently aware of the facts on the ground, then that's another challenge. When it comes to zoning, we don't have a good national database on what's happening with zoning because it's so unique to each community. That's why we ask the questions and we put it in the range. But I know you've got a bunch of other questions, Christine, so I want to not to make sure that folks have.
That's fine. Actually, we've hit our 2:30 mark. I can't believe it. We've already, right? I know, this happens all the time. And we still do have some questions. So folks, you can either reach out directly to the panelists, or we send a post report to the panelists so that they can see the questions that were asked but not answered, so that they can also reach out to you. So again, we are recording this session. You can check it out on our YouTube channel, just search Planning Webcast, and we'll have a PDF available to download on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. So thanks to the Private Practice Division of APA and Ramona, as always, for putting these together, and our great panelists of speakers, Jana, Laura, and Mildred. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And hey, everyone, have a great weekend. Tomorrow is summer, finally. And so enjoy and stay safe. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thanks,
weekend.
Ramona.
Keep
You
safe.
too.